far better or worse, much of the games market is moving to games as a service. Once upon a time, this was known as the MMO business model, because almost were games as a service, and virtually nothing else was. Obviously, a lot of GaaS games will not be MMOs. Candy Crush StarCraft is a service, but it's not MMO. Nor does GaaS mean the game has to be free to play with themselves via microtransactions. GaaS is a business strategy, and that is a revenue model. In the past we have seen services of all sorts drive revenue in lots of ways. In fact, cable companies and phone service both do just about all of the above at once. So there's lots of ways to make money if you have a service. And arguably, mature service businesses use as many of them as they can. But underneath it all is one inevitable underlying truth. There is no ongoing service without retention. This is why some game genres work better than others as services. If you can figure out how a given genre can retain, then you can make it work for GaaS. Whether or not it works for N2P is a separate, secondary question, and a lot of game types are built to be consumable, snackable, are played very intermittently. By their nature, they will work poorly as the sole anchor for a service. They might work great in the context for a service that has multiple offerings. Even something like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign meets this criteria. Heck, many classic tabletop games meet this criterion. Else people would not still be playing chess and Go. But an awful lot of games do not. What we are talking about is the line between a singular experience and something that can become a hobby, a regular pastime. What's the difference? In practical terms, take two games. They sold or gave away the exact same number of copies. The block is the cumulative number of users who tried the game. Game was popular, but for a short period of time. Each player lasted a day. Game B retained players. 90% of players stick around till the next day. The revenue potential is the area under the red curve, which is the game's active users. Game B has access to a lot more passion, a lot more interest, and therefore also a lot more money. The following mechanics are proven to drive retention. This is a non-exhaustive list, but covers most of the bases. I think these are mostly things you do with the game over time, in order to drive people to play it again, or turn it into a hobby. Consuming content as you move through a system can be very compelling. It could take the form of defeating, collecting, plot advancement, or more. It gives a clear aspirational goal for this session, and likely for the next session, and can hold people as long as the content keeps bringing changes on the basic mechanics. Leveraging this is how puzzle games were solidified and became viable as services. Even blowing up the current game balance and shifting it around can accomplish this, though it's risky. Also easily monetized. Most N2P games basically rely on constantly offering users more stuff without actually changing the game very much. Expensive, like, very expensive, like, people underestimate how expensive. And if you are solely dependent on this, and miss an update, you can actually lose your audience. Regular updates is best practice nonetheless. A familiar approach that is easy to implement. You will invite RPG-style mechanics. Even piling likes into a profile counts here. It's basically about having a persistent profile that accrues over time. Leaving would mean the loss of the accrued value, and more importantly, the standing in a cumulative works best if there's a community to display the profile to, which you then have to build and run. Also, you tend to add new content at the top, which can alienate new players. Gradually over time, via a host of mechanics ranging from manipulation to game overcomplexity. Lastly, Real community prominence is more valuable than the level number proxy you give it. If the player can move to another setting and retain that prominence, this may not serve as a retaining anchor. This is what save games in building games do. Unlike character investment, which can be sort of portable, this can never leave the game. It is also even more powerful if collaboratively built, because it then implies also building a set of social types. It also serves as an outlet for a couple of other methods listed below. Expensive to design and implement, data-intensive to store, and it introduces a host of design challenges around space, public display, and more. Social groups are the primary glue in games in general. Even single-player games have huge social characteristics to them, around widely shared experiences and common ground. Social ties introduce a host of extremely powerful things like mutual obligation, economic exchange, group identity, and so on. See my old talk on social mechanics for more. Looser connections and cumulative can often work better than a tight-knit community. Guilds often migrate games as a whole, so you want your user tied to the community via multiple touch points that are not in the same guild. Social connections also bring drama, which means community management, moderation, and much more. There's a vast amount of expertise involved in engaging in governance here, and even though this is arguably the most powerful tool in the arsenal, it's also very challenging and causes burnout in staff on a regular basis. This might happen with real money, or it might happen with play money. The profit motive is incredibly powerful and will keep players engaging in your experience well past the point of actual enjoyment, regardless of whether it's real or fake money. Though, the fact that it is effectively a self-generating set of ongoing challenges means that it's a substitute for content. The game keeps refreshing itself in somewhat unpredictable ways. If using real money, it can quickly chase out more playful ways of engaging. Either way, it requires a robust set of systems that enable trade, sales, and so on. And dynamic virtual economies are much harder to design and balance than static ones. This is of course the classic method used by chess and Go, but also games like StarCraft, a game that has enough depth and complexity to it that players continually see no heuristics ahead, no ways to improve, and effectively never see the game as boring, is in many ways the holy grail of game design, particularly when paired with multiple ways to play, variants, restarting with odds, classes, speedruns, lots of ways to do this. A rule of thumb I have used for over a decade is, it's a good sign if your game merits a player written strategy wiki. Are you a good enough game designer? Frankly, this can feel like capturing lightning in a bottle. Also, be aware that high skill ceiling often does not play well with accessibility. Other players are a free source of depth. This has also been a default tactic for literally centuries, so much so that it has merited being called the orthogame, almost the default historical format. Watch out for zero-sum play, one winner, one loser, causing players to be chased out. The typical user loses more often than they win, because the most skillful players tend to take up a disproportionate number of the wins. The result is that historically, most services based solely around this managed to only get 1/10 of the population of services based on cumulative character mechanics, like a PGS. Today, we are seeing a melding of competitive play with other items on this list, such as content trickle, which hugely ameliorate this. There's also the current common tactic of offering the game as a non-service and having a service, only for the higher echelons of players. Pro. It can be in various forms. It can also be surprisingly cheap to build, extra powerful if it can be monetized by the player, but powerful even if not, as long as user creativity has a publicity channel that garners audience. Con. It can also be crazy expensive to build if you are not careful. Also, creativity depends on audience to a very large extent, so you must have infrastructure to support sharing, showcasing, and so on.